The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the latest episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds called Spock Amok. I'm sorry, I'm going to rhyme it. This is the way it's going to be. If you're going to do it, I'm going to rhyme it. I'm Dom Bettinelli.
Whereas technically it should be Spock Amok.
It should be, yes. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel, as you've heard, are Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy.
And Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Folks, be sure to stick around to the very end because we've got some great feedback from listeners on our previous episodes. And I want to tell you to get your very own Secrets of Star Trek t-shirt featuring the three of us in the Enterprise by visiting sqpn.com/merch, M-E-R-C-H. You get t-shirts and phone cases and stickers and all kinds of things at that link. So go definitely check it out. Also, be sure to check out the Father Cory collection. Just want to let you know there's. I think there's a Jimmy collection too that I made, but so definitely check those out.
I haven't been aware of this. So.
Yeah. It's basically all the designs that have each of you on them in one place, so you can get a whole set at once. I also want to tell you about another show on the network you're sure to enjoy called The Secrets of Star Wars at sqpn.com/Star Wars or wherever fine podcasts are found. So, Jimmy, can you give us a recap of Spock Amok?
This week, it's Vulcan Freaky Friday on Strange New Worlds. So our Let's Meet the Crew of the Enterprise episode focuses on Spock. Having survived its encounter with the Gorn, the Enterprise is at Starbase 1 for repairs, and Spock's fiancée T'Pring has come to meet him. But their relationship has hit a rocky patch because they're both concerned that he's too human and doesn't prioritize Vulcan stuff enough to make this work. They try a soul-sharing mind meld to understand each other better, but it goes wrong and they accidentally do a body swap. Hijinks ensue because they have to pretend to be each other. And we have our first comedy episode of a live-action Star Trek in a long time. T'Pring has to pretend to be Spock in a delicate negotiation situation with a new Zelig-like race of aliens that insist on talking only to him, while Spock has to pretend to be T'Pring in a delicate negotiation situation with a logicless Vulcan who she's trying to capture for rehabilitation and who insists on talking only to her. Meanwhile, Number One and La'an try to understand the crew better by playing the Lower Decks rule-breaking game Enterprise Bingo. In the end, Pike helps T'Pring succeed in his negotiations, and Nurse Chapel helps Spock succeed in his negotiations with the Vulcan criminal, which is accomplished by Spock punching him out. Pike also succeeds in forging an alliance with the aliens by showing that he can understand their viewpoint and all the reasons they might not want to ally with the Federation. Dr. Mbenga and Nurse Chapel eventually get Spock and T'Pring's Katras back in their right bodies, and as a result of their experience, they now understand each other better and decide to stay together, at least for now. The end.
Yeah, we know where that relationship's going. So let's start with it at the top. We have this dream sequence that Spock has of the wedding ceremony, and it's a lot of fun because we're going back to Amok Time, the original series episode in which Spock's wedding goes awry in almost the same way, frankly, which is kind of an interesting prediction for this Spock 10 years earlier. And he has to fight himself, though, instead of Kirk.
Yeah, so here T'Pring challenges and insists on ritual combat. And here Spock has turned into a human, and as her challenger, as her champion, she picks a Vulcan version of Spock, and so they fight.
Right.
Whereas in Amok Time, she chooses Kirk, a human, to fight the Vulcan Spock. So we have the same kind of Vulcan versus human combat going on in both episodes. I liked that they brought back the fight music from the original, da 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 da.
Yes,
that was nice. That was fun. Also, I liked, although they don't make a big deal out of it, but as they're lashing at each other with their weapons, which are called lirpas, they have a blade on one end and a club on the other. But as Vulcan Spock lashes at human Spock, if you look carefully, because it goes by quickly, human Spock bleeds red instead of green, and that's a nice touch.
In the same place that Kirk, by the way, gets cut. It's like the same cut on Kirk,
like the stomach, yeah. And so I liked all that about the scene. What I didn't like about the scene, it's our opening scene, and as soon as human Spock is revealed, it's like we're in a dream,
right?
And we're not even halfway through this sequence yet. It goes on way longer. And once you've revealed, the value of dreams in television like this is you want the audience thinking things are normal, and then you want them to have a something is wrong here moment. And then you don't want to linger in the dream. You want to get out once the audience has realized we're watching a dream, because they know nothing of consequence is going to really happen if the dream is being played for drama, as opposed to like communicate a prophecy or something. But once the audience has realized we're in a dream, you don't want to linger in it too long. And here we have to watch this fight sequence, and I think this would work better for me on second viewing, knowing this is a comedy episode. But this is the first scene. I don't know that this is a comedy episode yet. And so I'm thinking through a dramatic lens in terms of how to analyze this scene. And through a dramatic lens, you don't want to stay in a dream very long. And I just thought it went on for too long from that, at least not knowing that this is meant for comedy. It seemed to be too long from a dramatic perspective.
Well, it was clear that they went as long as they did because they wanted to do the callback to the original Amok Time episode.
Right.
And it really, and as I've said before, I haven't seen a lot of TOS. I have not seen that episode yet. We'll get to it eventually. So, I knew the music, because it is one of those things that's in Star Trek lore is the music, and the fight scene is a bit as well. So that all was familiar to me, but it was clear that this was meant to be, we're calling back to that original episode, and that's why they hung it on as long as they did, but changing the characters that are involved in it.
I also think the title was a misdirect. I mean, as soon as I saw last time Spock Amok, I'm like, oh, are we doing Ponfar already? I mean, that's just, would that not upset the continuity? And then they showed this wedding scene right up front, and you're like, oh, what are we doing? This is out of sequence. And then they misdirected. And so Spock Amok is not about the Ponfar. It is about, Spock as T'Pring, and T'Pring as Spock running amok.
Yeah,
the hijinks that he does not like.
And this is an interesting and risky move on the part of the producers, because Amok Time is serious, and it's one of the considered best of the original series episodes. It's very emotional. At the end of it, when Spock realizes he has not killed Captain Kirk, which he thought he had, he's like, Jim, and it's the first genuine, overt expression of emotion we've ever gotten from Spock.
Right.
And so to take something that revered and that dramatic and play it for comedy is an interesting decision, and it's a risky one, but I think it worked.
I do too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and by the way, Jimmy, spoilers. Come on, man. I'm kidding. They're a 50-year-old episode, 50-plus-year-old episodes.
Sorry, Father Cory. So I have to say about T'Pring, I like this T'Pring much more than I like the original, who only got a very little screen time, of course. But I really like this T'Pring, even if she is going to break Spock's Vulcan heart eventually. I like the character. I think she's interesting and fun, especially how they play her as this actress has to pretend to be Spock in T'Pring's body. I enjoyed that.
Yep.
This version of T'Pring is less ruthless than the original. She's trying to work with Spock. In fact, she even made the proposal of marriage to him.
Yes. And so and like you said, she's come to sort of spend time with him because his duties have taken him away from her, and so she's working to make that connection. I do like, by the way, we wondered last time, are we going to just go from the Gorn basically trashing the Enterprise to the Enterprise being whole for the next episode? And they didn't do that. They took her back to Starbase One so that she could be repaired.
The Enterprise was whole for the next episode, but that was because it was after repairs. Repairs had been finished.
Yeah.
Also, we have another ongoing character arc that's spanning multiple episodes. So we even though we don't have a season arc in terms of one coherent plot, or incoherent plot like Discovery, they are having character development over the course of the series, which is nice.
Also, regarding T'Pring and Spock's relationship, there is this, it is not emotionless or passionless. It's restrained emotion and passion. And I think that's been the key to effective Vulcans throughout Star Trek, is recognizing that Vulcans are not emotionless. Like Leonard Nimoy never portrayed them as emotionless in the original series, just restrained, just tamped down, just calm, not this other stuff.
They're not meat datas, where they're just like Data, emotionless and just by the facts, by the logic. No, they have emotion and they show emotion just very differently.
Even Data showed emotion, because if you don't have emotion, you don't get out of bed in the morning because you don't care about anything.
Right. Yeah. The whole shtick about Data being emotionless is it was kind of
he may not feel emotion, but he's programmed to act as if he does.
Yeah.
At least to a certain level.
There you go.
One thing that I thought in this episode is that the Vulcan dialogue delivery between Spock and T'Pring, especially before the body swap, is too brisk and snippy with each other. And I don't know if that's because of the direction that the actors were given, or if it was the actors' choices, or if it was even to some extent in the writing. But they're like being really snippy and passive aggressive with each other, and the dialogue is going by faster than I thought it should. I thought the classic Leonard Nimoy Vulcan ethos would have been to slow this down a little bit and not have it be as passive aggressive, snippy with each other.
I wondered if some of the way they're playing the Ethan Peck Spock is because he's younger. I mean, not it's 10 years younger, but still that he's younger and not as experienced and as later Spock will be. But I get what you're saying, though. It was very quippy in back and forth between T'Pring and Spock. It was interesting to see. And he was clearly nervous in that waiting for her to come. And again, I felt like that might have been a choice to show him as younger and less experienced. So T'Pring's job is to rehabilitate Vulcan criminals. Is that really? I gathered
she's a Vulcan logic bounty hunter.
Yeah. I mean, are they criminals because they've forgone logic, or as criminals they have forgone logic? I didn't get that.
I was thinking it's kind of a combination of both, that they were criminals, but part of being they were criminals because they had forgone logic.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know that you have to have made a conscious break with logic, which means you're the term for it is what is it? Vatoshkatur, Vulcans without logic, who we met in Enterprise, and presumably Cybok was one of those. I don't get the impression, or I didn't get the impression, that her job is to track down and stamp out those people, but to deal with criminals who have in one way or another deviated from the path of logic, and she's going to show them the correct path again to rehabilitate them, like that Vulcan in Deep Space Nine in the episode Field of Fire, where he had a transporter gun and he was a serial killer. He was a mass shooter of people on the station. And I forget if this line is actually in the episode or if it's just so perfect that it needs to be in the episode. But like when Ezri has tracked down the killer and asks him why, I have this image in my mind of the killer saying it was logical. You know,
I think I remember that. Yeah, it was a logical thing to
I
do.
think it was.
That's the perfect line, and I can never tell if I'd have to go back and check, but it needs to be there if it's not, because that's, of course, for a typical Vulcan, that's going to be the rationalization for any crime, is they're going to have some tortured logical reason why this was the correct thing to do. And so I would imagine, T'Pring, like being able to work with that guy. He was not Vatosh Couture, but he had strayed from the path of true logic in leading him to become a mass murderer. And now she's going to help him understand what the error of his reasoning was.
She's almost like a U.S. Marshal, a Vulcan Marshal sort of thing. So he's going to check every outhouse, doghouse, or from The Fugitive. One thing I want to mention here is the trend with all of these episodes. This is sort of a little bit out of sequence, but have these teasers, the before credit sequences. There's not even one scene. It's almost like a fifth act of every episode. These are basically 5-act episodes. That they have this whole act of a bunch of scenes before the credits roll. I just think that's an interesting idea that they've split this, because in usual TV land, an hour-long episode is 4 acts, a teaser, and then four acts with commercial breaks in between the acts. But they're going with 5 of them here. I just thought that's an interesting structure.
And Next Generation did that for a while too. They would have 5-act structures, and then they would like shift and say, okay, no, we're now doing 4-act structures. But it's something that's not unprecedented in Star Trek history.
Well, it's something that you see a lot more with streaming services, where they will have, sometimes as long as even a 10-minute first act before. Because I can't remember, wasn't there a Discovery episode where they did that?
Well, this one was like 10 minutes. It was, I think I looked, it was like 10 or 11 minutes before they got to the credits.
Yeah, and that's something they're and it's I will say I give them credit for that. They're willing to play with the stereotypical television structure, show structure, because of what streaming can do. Because of course, part of the reason why you have this short teaser and then the opening credits is because TV says then you must have a commercial after 5 minutes of the show starting or whatever. Right.
And you got to draw people in who've been watching the previous episode, the previous show that was on airing, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Well, in terms of the body swap that they do, people who are newer to Star Trek may be going, body swap, really? Isn't that kind of cheesy? And well, that's a subjective judgment, but it'd been done before on Star Trek. And in particular, one of the things that the Vulcan ritual they do reminded me of was the Trill rite of emergence that we got to see in Deep Space Nine, where as part of understanding her development as a conjoined Trill, Jadzia uses a ritual to have her previous personalities reemerge one at a time and inhabit the bodies of her friends, so she can interact with her previous selves and learn from them in a different way. And that's a body swap of a sort anyway, because you've got, one of Jadzia's previous feminine personalities in Quark, much to his discomfort. Another more direct parallel, though, is the final episode of the original series. It's called Turnabout Intruder, and it is a body swap episode where a woman named Janet Lester uses an alien device to do a body swap with Captain Kirk. So you've got William Shatner playing a woman in Kirk's body, and you've got the lady actor, whose name I forget, playing Kirk in her body. Yeah. And that it's some very interesting, performances. And we get some of that here, where you have the T'Pring personality being played by Ethan Peck and vice versa. And it leads to some nice stuff on the dialogue level, like when Pike bursts into, or it doesn't burst in, but interrupts Spock and T'Pring as after they've spent 4 hours trying to switch back with different rituals. And Pike shows up, T'Pring, Spock in T'Pring's body is saying to Pike, "Oh, you must speak with Spock, who is right here." And it's just a little, it's quirky, and that's fun. Another thing I thought was fun in this scene is when they're saying the ritual in Vulcan, we get a confirmation of something that makes a lot of sense to me. Spock is just the English pronunciation of his name. Really, it's Spock, with the guttural sound, which we don't use in standard English, although it is in Scottish English if you ever want to go to Loch Ness or Loch Lomond.
That's how T'Pau pronounces it, I think, in the original Mock Time. Yeah,
I think so, yeah. But it makes a lot of sense, and so I appreciate that.
I got a kick out of when Pike comes in, where Spock in T'Pring's body keeps wanting to call him Captain and hesitates to call him Chris, and vice versa. T'Pring keeps wanting to call him Chris instead of Captain.
Ethan Peck holds his hands like T'Pring was, and there's all the subtle bodily cues. There is a thing where, like, before Pike comes in, they decide they have to pretend to be each other, and T'Pring says, "I do not like hijinks. Neither do I, but it appears that hijinks are the most logical course of action."
What a great line.
That was such fun. I want to backtrack, though, because there's some important scenes that happened before that. So we have these Rongovians that Admiral April wants Pike to negotiate a treaty for transit rights. They're at a strategic location between the Romulans and the Klingons and the Federation, etc. And one of the things I was thinking about is, in Star Trek, it's often, not always, but often Starfleet doing diplomacy, not civilians. And I can see doing it out on the frontier, a Starfleet captain being empowered on the frontier. But they're at Starbase One. You presume that the Federation Diplomatic Corps has people nearby. So why is it Pike?
We even see some of them in the original series, which is set in the same general time frame. There's the commissioner in Metamorphosis. There's the lady commissioner from Father Know Best.
Right.
Father Knows Best, who is there and eventually decides to set up housekeeping with a cloud.
Yes.
And there's also, in the Overpopulated Planet episode, there's another commissioner who's butting his nose in. So you have these diplomatic commissioners who are apparently civilians. They're not wearing Starfleet uniforms in the original series, and you would kind of expect that here too.
Yeah.
It doesn't really make sense that here at Starbase One, a captain who is not even normally in residence here would be negotiating this. I guess you could try to explain that by the fact that Tellarites already have tried negotiating with them and it didn't work.
Right. There was this combative. The Rogovians appear to be very combative and not like it. And then they show up, and then they're different. And I was thinking, so are they empaths? Is that they pick up the emotional state of the people they're with? But it turns out they don't do that either. It's interesting.
Yeah,
they're just mimics.
The which is why I said they're like Zelig.
Yeah.
For people who may not be aware, Zelig was a movie by Woody Allen about a man named Leonard Zelig who so wanted to fit in with other people that he would adapt himself to whoever he was around.
Right.
And so it started when he was in a conversation with some people who had read Moby Dick, and he was ashamed to acknowledge he'd never read Moby Dick and he wanted to fit in. So he pretended that he had read Moby Dick, and it kind of took off from there to the point that if he's standing around with doctors, he becomes a doctor. If he's standing around with bricklayers, he becomes a bricklayer. He'll just fit in with whoever he's with and try to pass himself off as like one of them. And that's essentially what the Rongovians are doing. They are doing some kind of empathic thing where they've decided to relate to each other, at least in a negotiating situation. You become like the other person. And so they became like the Tellarites and were aggressive and rude to them. When Pike is nice to them, they become nice and friendly. And then later, when they are negotiating with Spock, they become cold and logical.
And they explain it in the episode that it's actually a negotiating trick, that the ambassador is changing his personality or how he presents his personality differently depending on who because you see that when the ambassador first comes in, he's rough and aggressive, and as soon as Pike is nice, I would have made an Earth delicacy for you. then he's like, oh, it's wonderful to meet you, Captain, and on from there. So it's not like it's a telepathy type of thing. It's more he's reading the personality of the person he's dealing with.
He's cold reading,
and that's part of the and so. And that they even threw. I missed it the first time I watched. I watched the episode twice. And I missed the first time where the ambassador says Ringovians are deeply, or not deeply, but we have are known for our empathy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that's the key right there, is saying it's not empathic. It's they want to be understood from their point of view, and they seek to understand others from their point of view.
And Pike didn't seem to do that to them, apparently. He was nice to them, but he didn't deeply enter into their perspective on their first encounter.
Right. Until the very end, where he goes, there's no reason why you should join the Federation. In fact, it would make it worse for you. And then the ambassador's like, okay, we got it.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, that's the interesting. In fact, their negotiations, their diplomacy is actually very sophisticated. They have these tactics. They show up early, unexpectedly. They do this, the mimicking. It turns out they're not these combative, unsophisticated people. They're actually quite sophisticated in their tactics.
By the way, also, so Ethan, Anson Mount and his hair again do a great job in this episode. But we also get to see the return of the green captain's relaxed shirt.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because that was something they introduced with William Shatner back in the original series. He wasn't always in the gold pullover. He also had this kind of green wraparound thing. And they have a new version of that for Pike, which, in keeping with the modern aesthetic they've been pursuing with uniforms, it's not just a piece of cloth the way the original shirts were. It's a little more stylized. It's got some kind of, I don't know what you call it, but like leather patches that are also green.
Yeah.
They're leather striping, and so it's a little more formal, but it's still the green captain's relaxed shirt from the original series.
Well, and unlike when Kirk would wear it, he had Pike is wearing like an undershirt. He's got like a black T-shirt underneath.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm curious if Shatner was behind that. I wonder if anyone has ever asked him about that. So we have the secondary plot is shore leave for the crew. The crew is all getting the ability. They're on Starbase 1, which has all these environments that you can go to, including like a forest and that sort of thing. And so we have a scene of Chapel, Ortegas, and Mbenga going on shore leave, heading to the transporter room. And Mbenga is going. He says he's going fly fishing. He is not fly fishing.
That's not fly fishing. He does not have the setup fly fishing. And this is something I have to call out because I live in an area that has lots of fly fishing. Yeah. I've not done it, but I know many people who do. His rod is not set up for fly fishing. He's got lures, not flies.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So what's the difference between a lure and a fly?
So a lure is
it's a big plastic.
You see where it's
basically.
Yeah. Yeah, a lure is, it might look like a worm. It might look like a
small fish.
Small fish or something like that. A fly literally looks like a fly.
It's
and
tiny.
The purpose of it is, it's tiny. It's usually
it's like a little knot of thread that's kind of been cut on, put on a needle.
The idea is
basically
it's extremely light. When you're fly fishing, it's the weight of the line that casts that throws the fly out, and the movement of the rod in the line is designed to mimic a fly on the surface of the water, whereas a lure is about the weight of the lure is what draws it out, and lures are underwater. They mimic the movement of fish or worms. Or even bugs underwater, and that's a primary difference.
If you ever watch someone who's really good at fly fishing, they can take that fly and have it hit the same spot of water every time, or real close to it, because it's supposed to mimic a fly literally landing on the water. Versus a lure, again, it wants to go under, and you kind of play with it to wiggle it around.
And I can see why fish would want to play with lures. I mean, as a boy, I had lures of plastic worms. I loved playing with those plastic worms.
Yeah, those are fun.
Just not the ones with the hooks in them already. Anyway, so he had a bait casting reel, and someone needs to take the Star Trek writers fishing and show them what for.
But he got paid up for that because he made the mistake of mentioning the nickname.
Yes, right. The transporter room. where number one and La'an are seeing off the crew, and they're saying, "Oh, we're not going on shore leave, we're staying behind." And Mbega kind of absentmindedly says, "Oh, hence the nickname." And Una says, "What nickname?" And forces him to say, "Where fun goes to die."
Yeah.
Actually, Ortegas is the one who. Who. Because Mbenga is too uncomfortable to say it, and so Ortegas finally says, "Oh, it's the ensigns, call you where fun goes to die, but ensigns or yeomen."
Yeomen, yeah. What do they know? That's why they're yeomen.
I love Mbenga. He's like, "Oh, never mind, Ensign Kyle or Chief Kyle, let's go."
Energize.
He's like, "No, wait."
Belay that order. and then we have a scene of Chapel and Ortegas in a bar on the starbase talking about this relationship that Chapel has with this other officer and how she's keeping it casual. She doesn't want anything serious.
She's really not into commitment at this point.
Well, at the end of the episode, she almost tells Ortegas why she doesn't want a serious relationship. And I'm wondering, is this a hint to maybe we're going to talk about Roger Corby from the original series?
That would be cool.
And that's why because he left her and it was her fiance, and maybe she's emotionally damaged from that, and that's why she's playing the field and doesn't want a commitment.
Now, I would be interested. I'd hope they go there, because right now, again, for someone who's not as familiar with TOS, I would say, and maybe people who've never seen TOS at all would say, well, it's because she wants Spock.
And they hinted
she's flirted with him.
They hint at that,
right?
Because she's previously flirted with him or at him. In this episode, they have bonding over helping him with praying in his love life. And then at the end, when Chapel's talking with Ortegas, she makes Ortegas asks her a question about, well, would you ever consider, this in the future? And she says, well, it'd have to be the right guy. And she pauses. And I think we're meant to understand from that she's identified Spock as potentially the right guy.
Right.
And then when Ortegas presses, like, who is this guy? She shuts it down and will not further discuss it.
In the original series, in the original Amok time, even, it is clear that Chapel kind of has a thing for Spock. Like, she has a soft spot for him. She brings him plomeek soup when she thinks he's not feeling well and that sort of thing. So it's clear
it's not just a soft spot. She is secretly in love with him.
Right.
Although I got a kick in this where, Chapel's the one who's, basically playing with guys. She doesn't want the serious relationship. She just wants the fun. But then when it starts getting serious, she bails. And then immediately goes and starts giving Spock relationship advice.
Right. So
not the best example.
Before this, T'Pring gets mad at Spock for standing her up for dinner because he gets called into these negotiations unexpectedly. The Ringovians had shown up unexpectedly. And they have this tiff that she does with Spock about
we get to see the Vulcan food they didn't eat.
Yes. And she basically wonders at him if this relationship is going to work out. And she says, because we've all got to make sacrifices, he says, for our duty. And she says a shared acceptance of mutual sacrifice is crucial to a successful relationship. And then she walks out because she doesn't think that he's, it's a mutual shared acceptance. And, I kind of like, is she being unreasonable? I mean, not necessarily, but
I think there's room for criticism on both sides here.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think he could have done a better job of like, Captain, can I take a moment and let T'Pring know that I'm going to be late for dinner? Like, just take a moment, step out. So,
by the way, I wanted to mention the guy that Chapel is here to hook up with.
Devers.
Or Deaver, or I don't know if it's Deaver or Devers, but
Dever.
Yeah, and they're pronouncing it weird because there is a real name. I mean, growing up, I knew a family named Deaver.
Yeah,
and they're pronouncing it different. But he's on a ship called the Skylark, and that is a deep cut sci-fi callback because back in like the 1930s. Earlier, there was a famous set of sci-fi space opera stories, some of the first space opera, called Skylark of Space.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
And so that the reference to him being on the Skylark is a wink to sci-fi fans with a deep knowledge of the genre, because Skylark of Space was one of the early classics of space opera.
So in the bar, when after Chapel and Ortega have been talking, Chapel sees Spock alone and goes to talk to him, and he kind of reveals that he's having relationship troubles, and she says, "You're very intelligent, but you're also very stupid." And Spock responds, "I feel I should have seen that coming," which is a nice moment. She gives him a smack upside the head. And again,
this is an Earth gesture I'm not familiar with.
Right. Again, this Spock is younger and less experienced than the one we see in TOS, and it shows. I mean, he's so tentative in this scene as well. It's kind of fun, and so we get this moment between Chapel and Spock, which is good. We also get La'an and Una.
And in that moment also, Spock, Spock thanks her for the relationship advice, and she says, "What are friends for?" And he looks at her puzzled, and "What are friends for?" And she says, "Spock, that was rhetorical." And he says, "Humans are almost as easy to tease as Vulcans."
That was cute.
So he was deliberately pretending not to understand the phrase, "What are friends for?"
So let's talk about La'an and Una's subplot, because this is a fun one. They, after having been called "Where Fun Goes to Die," she's now offended at this idea, even though, what's wrong with work? I prefer work to shore leave. Shore leave is such a waste. I enjoy work. Work relaxes me. And they're agreeing. And it's kind of funny because they're the two most uptight people so far on the show.
And I wanted to comment on that. I've seen commentary from others wondering if La'an is too similar to number one. And they're kind of occupying the same general sort of character space, in terms of their personality archetype. And I know one online commentator who's like, "No, I'm here. I want to see number one. La'an is a distraction. Tell me about number one. She's the one I've always been interested in. La'an is this new character, and she's too similar," and so forth. And that's a legitimate concern. At the same time, I've seen this kind of thing on other shows played with a lot of success. There is a show called Community about a community college, and one of the characters from season 1 forward is a girl named Annie, who is perky and cheerful and super efficient. And then over the course of the next 6 seasons, we're still waiting on the movie because it's 6 seasons in a movie or die. But over the course of the next 6 seasons, they had some cast changes. And so in the last 6th season, they bring in a new character named Frankie, who is like an older version of Annie. She's professional, she's efficient, she's cheerful, and she's like an older Annie. And they even hang a lantern on it when another one of the characters, whose name is Abed and views everything that happens in his life as if it's a TV show. He tells Frankie shortly after she's introduced, "I'm concerned about your character. I think you're too much in the same character space as Annie. I don't know how to differentiate, and it's messing with me." And but what they do in Community is they acknowledge the similarity of the two characters, and they let them play off each other. So that you put them in the same space and make them interact, and that shows you what's similar and different about them. And they did the same thing on Deep Space Nine, where everybody is cranky, but Odo is a cranky alien loner, and then they bring on Worf, who is a cranky alien loner.
Yeah.
And what they did was they shoved them into the same space and made them interact with each other, and even had them bonding over what it's like to get rid of people who come to your door and want to say hello and things like that. And so I think when you have two very similar characters, that is, from a writing perspective, one of the best ways to deal with it is force them into the same situation and let them react to each other. And that's what they do with number one and La'an here. And I thought it was very successful.
Yeah, I agree. And they do show differences in the characters. Una wants to just immerse herself in the work. She just wants to be undisturbed, let me work and don't bother me. La'an likes the quiet. She says, there's no line for the replicators or the synthesizer, or whatever they call it then. No line for the synthesizers, and it's just the quiet hum of the warp drive. She likes the quiet. She likes the solitude.
Mm-hmm.
Una wants the time to work, where she can be unbothered with her doing her duty rosters and stuff like that.
I also like La'an's total honesty, it's like almost like she's a member of that Romulan nun order with the total candor, where they're walking down the hall and number one is saying, as a senior officer, I don't get to really be a member of the crew anymore. And, I don't get to hang out with them and stuff. And La'an says, that's not because you're a senior officer. It's because you terrify people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then she goes, but that's good. That's a good thing.
Yeah. See, I'm with La'an, that quiet, having that quiet where, you don't have to wait for anyone for food and you just kind of, relax. I'm all for that. We can do this.
It's the introvert on the Enterprise. So in the midst of the scene, they get an alert and they catch two ensigns trying to go out an airlock, without authorization, and they want to interrogate them separately. And so La'an goes, bad cop. And Una says, oh, darn it. So she has to good cop them and they bad cop. And so they get explanations out of them. And it is this funny scene of them interrogating them. And it turns out they're doing something called Enterprise Bingo, which was introduced in the episode where Uhura got pranked by Ortegas to go to going to the captain's dinner in her dress uniform.
In formal dress. And she said, consider it your first square on Enterprise Bingo.
Right. Yep. So they were doing Enterprise Bingo, and we're going to go sign the Scorch, which we get an explanation for later. They get their shore leave revoked and are assigned to help Transporter Chief Kyle, who they react to so badly. He was apparently a horrible person to work for, which is this funny guy who has seemed like a nice guy so far. I hope they build on that. Like, they show us Kyle as being this nice guy, and then everybody reacts to him as if he's this horrible person to work for. I want that to continue.
That's kind of like Morn at DS9 where you couldn't shut him up.
Yes.
But he never said a word on screen.
Yeah, that would be fun if they portray him as a monster. We just never see him being anything but nice.
And then La'an and Una discover the Enterprise Bingo card in the ship's computer. And by the way, this is the most Catholic thing in Star Trek ever. Okay, just a bingo in Star Trek. I just want to. It's not really bingo. It's really just a checklist. It's like a scavenger hunt, really.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we have the rules. Father Cory, you hopefully screenshotted it for us, but it's also in Memory Alpha. And here's we see some of these. We use the transporter to reflavor gum,
which is an awesome idea.
Phaser stun duel, which La'an wins. She gets Una while she's not ready. Turbolift 2-floor shout challenge. What was that?
They both grab the controls in the those little handles in the Turbolift, and they shout out two different destinations. Yeah. So number one shouts out engineering, and La'an shouts out bridge, and the Turbolift has to decide which order to obey based on who spoke first or loudest or something.
Yep.
And the Turbolift decides to take them to engineering. So number one won that one.
Yep. Okay. We don't see any except the second to last one, the last two, but again, but the others are set the universal translator to Andorian.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that. I guess what that means is any language that's spoken to it, it will speak in Andorian. It will translate it with Andorian instead of English
or whatever the person needs. Yeah. The gravity boot hang challenge, whatever that is. Medical tricorder challenge, Vulcan marsupial. Food replicator challenge, durian fruit.
And I know exactly what that would be. So durians are a fruit from Southeast Asia, and they look kind of like a honeydew melon, except they're covered in spikes. And you break open you use the spikes to get a seam between some of them, and then you break open the durian, and inside there are these banana-like structures. But whereas bananas smell good and like bananas, what's inside of a durian smells not like bananas, but like burning rubber. And it's to Westerners, if you're not used to durians, it is amazing. It is like there's the closest analogy to what this smells like is either burning rubber or rotten socks. But it's considered a delicacy.
Yes. Considered a delicacy is code word for no one should eat this.
Yeah.
Well, no, people in Southeast Asia who grew up. I mean, I've had durian candy.
Yeah.
And wow, it's intense.
Yeah.
But
does it taste good though? Does it taste good?
Well, it has sugar in it, and it's kind of like sugar and rotten socks.
Oh, okay.
Or burning rubber.
Sign me up. Sign me up.
Yeah.
So supposedly the smell is so bad and it lingers so long that like hotels and restaurants will ban it.
Yes.
Oh man, sneak some into the office microwave. That's a nice prank for you. So
that's basically what this is doing.
Oh, I had a bag of durian candy once with some Catholic Answers employees, and one of my coworkers was wanting some candy, and I said, well, I have this. And before I could explain it, she took a piece and stuck it in her mouth. And it's like, then her eyes get amazingly wide.
Yeah.
I've done something like that to folks, but that's a story for another day. So other things on the list: sneak a tribble into the transporter buffer, which is sit in the captain's chair, EV suit challenge, an unsanctioned spacewalk, which is what they caught those two ensigns doing.
Yep.
And then sign the scorch. By the way, the tribble one might be a bit of breaking continuity because they didn't know about tribbles yet, right? Tribbles only get discovered.
No.
Oh, they knew.
Yeah, they already know about tribbles. They're in Discovery before they go into the future.
The Trouble with Edward.
Short tracks, yes. That very, very, very funny episode. That's true. Then sign the scorch, which is we'll find it at the end. That there's a hull plate. It's the last original hull plate on the Enterprise that has a scorch mark on it from, some battle or something like that. That they have, that if that people sign.
Yeah, it's never been repaired. It's this, and so it's become a tradition for people to go sign their names to it.
Right, and there's a. At one point, La'an and Una kind of just they realized this isn't as fun as they thought it should be, and part of it is because, well, they're the bosses. Like none of this stuff is out of bounds for them because they make the rules, and so they decide that they have to break the rules in order for it to really be fun, and so they set up a force fields on the hull of the Enterprise and walk out there without spacesuits to the scorch mark in a real rule-breaking moment. It's incredibly risky and dangerous. But
that sounds cool, though. Yeah, it sounds really cool.
It does sound cool. The last time we saw someone walking without a spacesuit on the hull of the Enterprise was in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, I think. Yeah.
Without a spacesuit?
Yeah, at the end when they're at the center of V'ger and they're walking to get, they walk onto the Giant's Causeway stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the pretty much Una and La'an's subplot. We talked about the Rongovians would only talk to Spock, and that's when Spock and T'Pring.
By the way, I wanted to mention in terms of the rules. So we named 11 of the items that are on Enterprise Bingo. There's more than that apparently, because the instructions actually say you need to do 10 of these without getting caught.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, there's apparently more. Including whatever it was that Uhura got caught on.
The prank or wearing a
uniform to the captain's dinner. Yeah,
just dress uniform.
I love though the first one they do, which is use transporter to reflavor gum. So what they have in that one is they've got La'an sitting in the medical transporter, and she's chewing gum, and she says, "Okay, the flavor's gone." And so number one dematerializes her and rematerializes her and says flavor check. And La'an goes to chew in the gum again and says spearmint.
That was good.
And so
kind of amazed.
Yeah. So this is kind of the equivalent. This is a fun application of what we've otherwise seen as a serious application of like, this person has been medically damaged. We've got to use the transporter to restore their DNA or something like that. And it's like, nope, we're just restoring flavoring to gum.
So we have this the Rongovian subplot where they'll only talk to Spock, and they do the right thing. Spock and T'Pring, they tell Pike, like they could have the writers could have dragged it out and had them pretend, but they tell Pike, who takes it in stride remarkably well, and basically says, "Okay."
He knows he's living in the Star Trek universe.
Yes, exactly. He says, "Okay, T'Pring, come with me." And she's like, wait.
Well, I love the line. I love the line of "Get out of town." Captain, we are not in a town.
We're not in a town.
which they use to clever effect in the teasers or in the trailers, because the line is spoken by Ethan Peck.
Yeah.
So it's like Spock saying we are not in a town, but it's really T'Pring. And that explains why, because she's less familiar with human stuff, why she would say that line.
Right.
Yep.
So T'Pring in Spock agrees to go and pretend to be Spock for the negotiations. Meanwhile, T'Pring's colleague, who's supposed to be taking care of the bounty that they're chasing, the escaped logic criminal, she calls to say that he won't meet with anyone but T'Pring, and Spock tries to get out of it, but the colleague says, "If not for us, who else will bring them back to the path of logic?" So that's the.
It's another great line. I'm not myself.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
that whole "if not for us" thing. Oh, we have a little bit of a hero martyr complex going on, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
And so Spock, as T'Pring, goes to Chapel for more advice, who tells him to help T'Pring. This will help your relationship by doing her job for her and getting to know her better. And Spock says, this is coming dangerously close to hijinks, which is another mention of hijinks. So it's interesting how T'Pring's resentment of Spock's absence from Vulcan almost torpedoes the negotiations with the Rongovians. And because she kind of agrees with the Rongovians, like, you shouldn't be, leaving your planet, and the Federation is going to take you away from your home and that sort of thing. And Pike has to step in to remind her, speak to her directly as if she's Spock, extolling Spock about all the good that he does and the sacrifices he makes that benefits so many others, and the logic of his duty. So it's kind of an interesting moment there for Pike. So then we have Spock, as T'Pring, brings Chapel with him to meet the criminal. What was his name again?
Barjan Ta'or.
Barjan Ta'or. He's a Vulcan with two names, apparently. And they meet with him.
Well, they all have two names. They just never tell us what Spock's last name is.
That's true. Smith. Although maybe it's Holmes, because it's one of his ancestors.
Well, his mom admitted she could only pronounce the family name after a fashion.
Right. So they go to meet the criminal, who takes offense at T'Pring bringing Chapel along, and when he balks at surrendering now, Spock just knocks him out, just hauls off and whacks him one. Interesting he doesn't do the neck pinch, but maybe as a Vulcan, he would have the Vulcan might have expected that. But in any case, it's not perhaps the accepted protocol, but it's effective.
And at the end, after they're back in their right bodies and Spock and T'Pring are laying in bed, he says, "I should probably tell you that I struck Barjan Ta'or." And she says, "Knowing him, it was logical."
So Spock does explain to T'Pring, one of the reasons why he's so comfortable on the Enterprise, much more so than on Vulcan, is, on the Enterprise, he's accepted for who he is. On Vulcan, he constantly has to prove himself as the half Vulcan, half human. And so, the Enterprise feels more comfortable.
Racist Vulcans.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. They really do portray throughout Star Trek, the Vulcans as being kind of racist against everybody else. They're really kind of arrogant. Just, you have to put it that way. T'Pring, on the other hand, reveals that she feared that Spock saw their relationship as a duty rather than something more. And so, and that's why he was not present more often and not present to her. So there's some communication going on. The body swap has been effective at some point. Of course, eventually it's not going to work out, but we get that here anyway. We have Pike doing the hunch with his hunch that the Rongovians really want honesty in their negotiations, and if they're honest with them about how it may not be in their best interest to join, to be part of the Federation, or at least be in a treaty with them, he thinks radical empathy is what they really value, and that's what we get to see. And as they fly off in their solar sail ship, flying the Federation flag, as is their custom, And when they eventually get back to their planet in 50,000 years or something like that, because it's a solar sail ship. That's not how solar sail ships work. Please, someone explain to Star Trek writers that solar sail ships cannot go interstellar distances.
Well, they can, but it's going to take a long time.
Exactly.
I'm headcanoning that they actually have their warp capable ship just, outside of the solar system or outside of the orbit of the planet or something like that, where they can get there in, a couple hours instead of. And
April acknowledged that this is by the Rongovian standards, this is an ancient ship, that they bring it out on ceremonial occasions.
Yep.
Right. It's kind of like the USS Constitution, perhaps, and they have another ship nearby to or maybe it has hidden warp engines or something like that. So when it's time to go, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not do the solar sail ships anymore, please. And then we get we kind of finish up with the scenes of Una and La'an on the signing the Scorch, and Chapel and Ortegas at the end discussing relationships, and that's about it. Although to Deaver's credit, he apparently is a pretty good poet. He insisted on sharing his poetry with Chapel, which she wasn't happy with, but she does say that at least it was pretty good poetry.
And then she dumped him.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because he wanted to get closer.
And that's about it. Any last thoughts? Any final thoughts on this, Father Cory?
Well, I enjoyed this. It was a kind of a fun episode. Like I said, it was more comedic. And definitely relationship part was big part of it, but it was fun and they played it well. There was a mention when Spock is talking to Chapel about his relationship that he had bonded his pet Sailot Ichaya, which of course we met at the animated series. Yep. Mm-hmm. And then Chapel tells him that she had a Malamute dog that may or may not have bitten a girl that insulted her.
Right. Jimmy?
So I like there's just a shot, and nothing gets said in it, but there's a shot where Mbenga is going fishing, and I know it's lure fishing, but it's it's slow motion, and it's just him, and he's casting his line, and the director uses a kind of heroic, presentation of that. Yep. and there's music, and it's just nice. It's just a really nice moment, and I like that. And, nothing happens. It doesn't advance the plot. They don't drag it out long, but it's just nice. And so nice. I like that. Later, when they're putting the Katras back, because their ritual ability to do this has failed, so they've sought a medical solution. Dr. Mbenga has both Spock and T'Pring in biobeds, and he's put sea urchin paste on their foreheads, and is also putting quartz crystals in the he's sticking quartz crystals into the sea urchin paste, and then they go to activate them, and Spock and T'Pring are both just screaming in agony, and Chapel turns to Mbenga and says, "They're going to neck pinch us for this, aren't they?"
That's right.
I forgot another really good Chapel line on how Mbenga was going to go and meet this doctor who's known for non-invasive surgery, and she said she's cutting edge in not cutting into people.
Yes, nice pun.
The question I had is, when is the last now Lower Decks doesn't count because it's a comedy series, but of the live action shows, when was the last time we got an actual comedy episode? I mean, they started in the original series, like with The Trouble with Tribbles, and there were others as well. And I can't really think of any comedy episodes at the top of my head in Next Gen. There were comedy episodes in Deep Space Nine, often centering around the Ferengi.
Right.
I don't know. I can't remember any Voyager episodes I would count as comedy episodes. They had comedy bits, like often involving the holodeck, like Fairhaven or Captain Proton.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I would consider any of those comedy episodes. And then in Enterprise, I don't remember any comedy episodes. So I'm thinking it may have been since Deep Space Nine. Certainly, I mean, Picard has comedy moments, but not episodes. Discovery is an emotional wasteland. It does not have comedy episodes. So it may be since DS9 that it's been since we've had a live action comedy episode of Star Trek.
See, maybe one of the mud episodes, the Space Whales episode.
Maybe.
Yeah,
that could be a little bit comedic.
Maybe
of course, the short trek mud episode was very much a comedic
as was
episode. The Tribbles at short trek. If you want to count short treks as Star Trek episode, but if you want to talk about full episodes,
full episodes. Yeah.
So I think you could say the second mud episode could be considered a comedic episode in Discovery.
Where time travel kills people repeatedly.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of funny...
It was played for great humor.
Yeah.
It was played for pretty good humor.
Yeah, it
Just
is.
the fact that he hit in a space whale. I mean, that right there.
And it's even got a comedy ending where we meet Stella.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would argue that. But if you wanted to talk before New Trek, I agree with you. I can't think of any since DS9. Like the baseball episode was definitely a comedic episode, things like that.
Right. Yeah, you get but a lot of, whether it's Ferengi or holodeck, definitely hijinks. I don't remember any hijinks episodes in Enterprise. Yeah. They could be, but it's not recalling it. All right, we have feedback on our most recent episodes. We have our first feedback comes from episode 210, which was on the last episode, Memento Mori. Heather on our Discord community says, I had heard this was a Gorn episode, but then wondered why I hadn't seen any images of Gorn on the internet, since I don't really actively avoid spoilers. Now I know why. Interesting approach. Now I'm really wondering if we will see them at all, if it was intended to build extra suspense. With Lon's super disturbing story in the first episode, now they're really making the Gorn out to be very creepy and sinister, and I thought the little girl imitating their clicking sound was well done.
I thought so too, and I suspect we are likely at some point, maybe not this season, but I suspect we are likely at some point to see the Gorn because they've already created cover canonically for the ability to see the Gorn. They've made it clear that no, Captain Kirk's encounter in Arena was not the first contact with the Gorn. As La'an says, lots of people have seen the Gorn. They just haven't survived. Right. So we can easily see the Gorn in this if the people don't survive or if there's another technology malfunction that prevents the capture of recorded images.
Right.
On our episode 209 on the Ghosts of Illyria, Brian sent an email. Could it be that after an encounter with NX-01, so the Archer's Enterprise, the Illyrians engineered some of their own to integrate into Earth society? If so, then conflicting loyalties could become the basis for an interesting plot twist later in this series.
Well, indeed. And since we now know that they are open to multi-episode character arcs, we would need to use that fact in looking at what they did with the ending of Ghosts of Illyria, where Pike says, I'll go to bat for you. Okay, That's a promise to the audience. One day he is going to go to bat for number one based on her genetic status. So I would expect this to come up again. Yeah.
And we talked about the DNA screen. How did DNA screen not find it? When we talked about that particular episode. And I did say, perhaps she was one that was genetically engineered to pass as human.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of saying the same thing, that there are some Illyrians who, for whatever reason, have been genetically engineered to pass as human.
One alien nucleotide is going to be a giveaway, though, in a genetic screening.
Right.
It's the space flu.
So our last feedback is from Dave via email, who's asking about actually the Orville. And I should introduce it. The Orville is a TV series that originally aired on Fox in 2017 for 2 seasons. Then hasn't been on air until it just returned, this time on Hulu, as the Orville New Horizons, because Fox has no idea of how to handle sci-fi shows, and the Firefly. And so it's by Seth MacFarlane, who created it, who's a big Star Trek fan, and it's an homage to Star Trek. And there's a lot of...
Specifically Star Trek Next Generation.
Right.
Yes.
And a lot of people who worked on Star Trek Next Generation are actually involved in the production of the Orville, including people like Brennan Braga, Andre Bormanis, folks like that. So Dave asks, please forgive me if this is something you've covered in the past, but I'm relatively new to the podcast. What are your thoughts on the Orville? And just as a way of starting, introducing, the three of us talked about the Orville in an episode of another podcast, The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows, episode 7 of that, called The Secrets of the Orville, which was covering the first half season back in 2017. So we really haven't talked about it since, and maybe we could. But what do you guys have? If you have thoughts on the Orville, briefly?
Yeah, I enjoy the Orville. I think it's a really well done series, and one thing Dom and I discussed offline through through the Discord actually is that how it started out very comedic and was pitched by Seth MacFarlane to Fox as a comedic take on Star Trek, basically
a satire, really.
But his intention, what he stated later in interviews, was no, he wanted to he sold it as comedic to get it on Fox, and then purposely drifted it to the more serious. And now the new season having started, the first episode being out by the time we're recording this, it's much more serious. Yeah. It's much more, it is closer, dramatic, much closer to a TNG type series than it was the comedic, than Lower Decks. I mean, when it started out, it was much more like Lower Decks.
Yeah.
But now it's much more like TNG.
It was like a live action Lower Decks, really, when it started. It was a lot of slapstick.
And I've enjoyed it so far. I've enjoyed the first 2 seasons. I'm looking forward very much to this season to see where it goes from here. So
it's been a while since I've seen any of the Orville. I watched the first season and I enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy everything about it. Some of the humor was a little crude for my tastes.
See Seth MacFarlane.
But it overall, it had fun aspects. It was clear to me that he was doing a fake out on the producers, that he pitched them with one series idea to get them to approve it. Really what he wanted to do is he just wanted to do Next Gen again. And he used the comedy parody aspect to get the show on the air, but it was clear he was going to be ditching that and was going to be fading it out. And that I understand why you would lie to network executives to get your show on the air. Because network executives, if you said, I want to reduplicate Next Gen, they're going to see lawsuit written all over that and not going to approve your series. Same way, if you're J. Michael Straczynski and you want to get your Babylon 5 Interstellar War show on the air, you don't tell the network executives, I want to do a show about politics and war in space. Because they're not sophisticated enough in sci-fi ways to understand that. They're going to think too cerebral, too boring, not going to work, pass. And so if you read J. Michael Straczynski's original pitch document, which I've got, he's talking in it about, there are going to be rumors of this war that could break out, but it never actually will. But that's going to be one of the driving dramatic devices of our show, is these rumors of a war. And it's like, no, he's totally lying. He's planning on doing a war and starting in season 2. This is just to get season 1 on the air. And so I kind of understand that, but it doesn't mean that it isn't, to my mind, an awkward hybrid. I kind of think if you're going to do comedy or drama, I mean, there are successful, things that kind of straddle the middle, but as a sci-fi show, I kind of want to see comedy done pure, like Lower Decks, which has its dramatic moments, but it's clear this is a comedy show. Or I want to see, a show this is a drama show, even if it has comedy episodes. And so like I liked Galaxy Quest or Lower Decks better as sci-fi comedy than I did the Orville. It was a little crude for my tastes, and it wasn't really committed to either being comedy or drama as a primary, at least in season 1, which is what I saw. Right. But it had enjoyable aspects, but it didn't ultimately grab me that much.
Yeah. By the time season 3 rolls around, they're committed to this new thing. But yeah, the DNA is going to, the characters have built up a past and a history through 2 seasons already that includes some of this comedic stuff. And so it's going to require the audience to really accept that change. And it's dangerous.
And it's interesting because we mentioned, we were talking about this right before recording, that there's characters. There's Yavit, the slug, who was voiced by the late Norm Macdonald.
Yep.
And he was extremely a comedic character, a really crude, extremely comedic character. And in at least this first episode, there's no comedic line to him whatsoever. I believe that Norm Macdonald did all his voice recording before he died, but there's no comedic aspect to his character in this first episode anyways. He's very straightforward, serious character.
Right. So interesting. And thanks. Maybe we'll do an episode in the future where we talk about the like we did with the Galaxy Quest. We'll maybe do a special 300 or 350 or something like that. We'll take an episode. All right, that should do it. We want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Ryan C., John T., Robert S., Lisa B., and Joseph R. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. We would love to hear what you think of Spock Amok. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page at facebook.com/starquestmedia, or send an email to trek@sqpn.com, or visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. We'll be back next time and we'll be discussing the next new episode of Strange New Worlds called Lift Us Where Suffering Cannot Reach. Shades of Discovery's episode title.
Shades of Love Lift Us Up Where We Belong.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, now I get that in my head. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Tom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thank you, and live long and prosper.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest, and remember, it appears that hijinks are the most logical course of action.